Hi, I'm Professor Green, and today we're going to be talking about Chapter 12, the strategy of international business. A lot of these topics will be a repeat from your strategy course, but here we'll have an application to international business. And again, just like anything in this course, I find it very interesting. Let's go ahead and talk about the learning outcomes or learning objectives. We're going to explain the concept of international business strategy, which is not so different from general business strategy. But now we're talking about, right, not just domestic products, but being able to go across borders and having a lot of opportunity for more business. We're going to recognize how firms can increase revenue and profit by expanding globally, understand how pressures for cost reductions and local responsiveness influence strategic choice. So again, being able to reduce cost, which is a big part of being globally competitive. Uh, Identify the different international strategies for competing and their pros and cons, explaining the pros and cons of using strategic alliances to support international strategies. So again, a really, in my opinion, interesting chapter. You'll notice my voice is a little strange today. I have COVID, but feeling better. So here I am. Geely is China's first global car company, a really exciting company. Probably not necessarily have heard of them unless you've lived in China. But maybe because they have hit the headlines in recent years with their taking over a lot of market share with Volvo. So they became a refrigerator manufacturer, and then entered the automobile industry in just 1997, right? So a short time ago. That was the same year that I graduated from Villanova, from college, about 25 years ago. Founded by the entrepreneur and car enthusiast Li Shufu. And today, Geely is the second largest private automobile manufacturer in China. So just in 25 years, they've gotten so much bigger. They reached an agreement to purchase Volvo for 1.8 million in 2010. And because, Shufu really enjoyed Volvo, let's say. He just feels that it's a very safe car. It's a really great opportunity to bring this car around the world and promise the Chinese people that, in theory, that they will not be hurt if they drive a Volvo, is his main motto. The marriage of Volvo's brand and the engineering design skills with Geely's manufacturing capability has proved to be a winning combination. What I think is also interesting is that actually his design is not Chinese, it's South Korean. No surprise, because the South Koreans do so well in automobile design. But the manufacturing, for the most part, takes place in China, which will, as the case discusses as well, it's emerged as a major market for Volvo cars, as we've said. And in 2018, sales rose 12.4% to a new record high. And the next slide has a photo of the Geely car. As you can see, it looks very much like a Volvo. Since the acquisition, China has emerged as a major market where the brand is valued for its safety and elegance. Now they have plans to merge the two companies, Geely and Volvo, so that for up until now they've been two separate companies, but he would like to actually merge them into one company, and they will soon be listed, it sounds like, definitely on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, and then potentially after that maybe on the Stockholm Stock Exchange. So as you can see, he's being very strategic, right, about where and how he's growing his business, starting as a refrigeration company, then moving into cars in China, and then seeing that there was a bigger opportunity for the car industry in China as well as around the world. And so then he bought Volvo. And right, the car industry and the Swedish economy didn't do so well in 2008. And so then in 2010, he had that opportunity to buy it at a decent price. And now he's being able to use the synergies together with the manufacturing from China, design from South Korea, and the brand recognition from Sweden. So let's go ahead and get into this. And why did he decide to do a lot of these things? So what we consider when we think about strategy abroad is we talk about the benefits of expanding into foreign markets. Why would we ever want to expand into a foreign market, right? For him, he felt like he could get that brand, that know-how, etc. He could also get, obviously access to consumers in the United States and all over the world who would like to buy a Volvo. um, which strategies to pursue in foreign markets, right? So hundreds of different strategies. How do you decide which one to pursue? Value of collaboration with global competitors, right? So he didn't start promoting Geely across the world, right? Probably for a number of reasons. There was no brand recognition. Maybe, products from China are, known to be cheap and not, very highly valued, et cetera. So instead, he decided to partner with Volvo, and now slowly combine those two companies. There are benefit, costs, and risks of strategic alliances, right? And that's why we study international businesses too, and international businesses to reduce those risks and really try and understand what it is that we're doing. So first, strategy. The action. What is strategy? The actions taken by managers to attain the goals of the firm. Um, Managers must pursue strategies that increase the profitability of the enterprise and its rate of profit growth over time. So that's our two things: profitability, right? That's the actual rate of return that it makes on its invested capital, and then the profit growth, right? How much is it? How much is that profit growing? The net percentage over time. And so for profitability, what we're really looking at are two different pieces that we'll talk about in a slide on the next page. But we're talking about lowering cost or adding value, right? And these two things then will raise the price. When we talk about profit growth, we're talking about selling more product in the existing market, or my favorite, entering new markets, right? And that allows us to grow the profits. So that shows up here in the next slide. As I just said, profitability, the first one, is reducing costs or adding value and raising prices. And then profit growth, so is selling more in your existing market. Ho-hum, in my opinion. But this is my favorite, right? Entering new markets. And exactly that's what your project's going to be about this semester, right? Is how can an organization enter a new market and have access to new consumers? Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide, because we're gonna break down each of these things here. Value creation is really the biggest part that we're gonna talk about in the next slide. So what is value creation? How do you increase your value? You do activities that increase the value to the consumer. So, right, it's the consumer who tells us that there's more value in a product. It's measured as the difference between the price the firm can charge and the cost, right? So that is the value, right? So you, if you're selling tequila, for example, you sell it for $30 a bottle, but the cost is actually only $15 a bottle, probably even less in the alcohol industry, but let's say it's half. So you're making $15 in profit, and that is potentially the value of to get the consumers. And so Michael Porter, one of our favorites from Harvard, he talks a lot about strategy. He has two basic strategies. He says, how are you going to do this? You're going to either differentiate or you're going to lower your costs. And the first thing is differentiate, which means increases your attractiveness. Why are you different than the other tequila brands? Why is your car different from the other car brands? And then, or you can just lower your cost, right? And it's the same product, but you're going to sell it cheaper. And really important to remember that the more value customers place on a firm's products, the higher the price the firm can charge. So again, if that tequila gets more and more popular, right? And now not only does it taste good, but you look cool buying it, or you look great bringing it as a gift, then maybe they can start to sell it at $35 a bottle. And now your value is more like $20 as opposed to $15. Let's go ahead and look at the next slide and look at these equations. So as we said here, we talk about V being the value. What is the value of a product to the average consumer? P is the price per unit. So that would be the $30 for the tequila bottle on average. C is the cost of production per unit. So that would be the $15 in my original example. It also includes the cost of capital, right? So all the different costs that go into not just making the tequila, not just buying the bottle, but the rent that you pay on the warehouse to make it, the distributor's cost, et cetera, et cetera. Then you have V minus P up here up at the top. This is consumer surplus per unit. This is really the value for the money, right? The V minus the P. So that would be the $15. And becomes $20 if it increases in value. Then you have the profit per unit sold here. This is P minus C. This is the firm will make money as long as P is greater than C, obviously, right? And if the cost becomes more than the profit, then we're losing money. And then lastly, we have V minus C, the total here, the total value created per unit. So a really nice little illustration as to how value creation comes together. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So strategic positioning, again, another key part of your final projects or bigger projects in the course. You want to pick a position on the efficiency frontier, again, keyword that you might want to include in your project that is viable. There's enough demand to support making sure that there's enough demand to support this choice. You want to configure your internal operations to support the position, which we're going to talk about in the next couple of slides. And then we want to have the right organizational structure in place to execute that strategy. So again, we're going to expand on this in the next couple of slides. But just know that the strategy, the operations, and the organization must all be consistent with each other in order to create what's known as competitive advantage, right? Hopefully a key term from your strategy course. I remember when I went to business school, it was so much fun always to use and learn these key terms. We would always use them then in the bar on Friday night. And so just to practice and just kind of have fun with them. So competitive advantage, right? A key part. And what that means is that your strategy, operations, and your organization must all be in line. And if you think about the organizations that you work for, hopefully they are. So let's go ahead and look at another illustration to see what the efficiency frontier looks like. So we're talking here about the hospitality industry. We see that the Four Seasons and the Marriott are on what they are calling the efficiency frontier. So they're making money in theory. And that there's increased value for differentiation, the V. There's higher cost over here, right? The Four Seasons, high cost, but still making money. But as we go down, lower cost, you can see you can still make money with the Marriott, et cetera. But right, that we want to make sure that we still stay in the increased value differentiation. And that's what this green circle is saying here, that strategic choices in this area are not viable in the hotel industry. And so, right, we don't want to choose a product that ends up here. We want to choose something that has really increased value and potentially higher cost, but not necessarily high cost, but definitely increased value. And you see Starwood sits over here. So there must be enough demand. We want to configure operations to support that choice then. And we want to make sure that the organization has the right organizational structure in place. So let's talk now about operations and the firm as a value chain. So what are the primary activities of operations? We're going to talk about primary activities, and then we're going to talk about support activities. The design, creation, and delivery of its product, its marketing, and its support and after-sales service. Divided into research and development, production, marketing, and sales, and customer service. So these are the main 4 or 5 components of primary activities. I have a friend from business school, Thunderbird, who says always choose a job in primary activities because he feels that you will never be laid off. He works in startups, and they run very often with very lean number of employees. And they have to, sometimes adjust very quickly. And so he thinks that primary activities are the way to go. Being in support activities, potentially you have a better chance of getting fired. Maybe not. So let's, but the book is saying that these support activities are just as valuable, if not more, than the primary activities. These provide the inputs that allow primary activities to occur. Information systems, one of my favorites again, because I worked in IT before I came back to teach. Company infrastructure, logistics, human resources. Let's look at the next slide. I'll give you some examples of what those are, although I know you're very familiar with them. So talking about the primary activities, right? R&D, my favorite example from the book is, you don't have to always think of like a lab or, a consultant that they hire to do research and development. Obviously in pharmaceuticals, they do a lot of R&D, but in every firm they do R&D, even the banking industry. That's my favorite example with the ATM, right? Citibank was initially the first people to come out with the ATM. So they spent a lot of money, and that's why they did so well in like the 90s or so. Then Bank of America took over with their technology when it comes to ATM. So they invested in a lot of R&D. Production, lots of different examples of production, but let's think about automobile production, marketing and sales. This is a fun one. How are you going to portray your product? Big Book gave a really nice example of Ford and how they took the Ford Expedition and they just added a few more bells and whistles, made it like a cleaner grate up front, made it, in like some, really sleek colors, etc. And then they marketing put a really cool label on it. This is now your luxury SUV, but actually inside, it's really the same, pretty much the same thing. Customer service. So again, adding value, right? We call it a luxury SUV. Customer service. This is one we all deal with when we buy products, when we call the hotline. But even more than that, the example that they give in the book is Caterpillar, right? So after sale, if you have to get parts for your farm equipment, how does that work? So all these different primary activities really key to the operations of a firm. Then we have our support activities, information systems, right? Making sure that we understand all the different parts of our business, right? As I said, when I worked in IT, there were over 300,000 employees at Citibank, and 25,000 of them worked in IT because IT is just such a main key component to banking as well as many other industries. Logistics, right? The example here is with Dell, making sure that they can reduce their costs by making sure that they don't have to spend a lot on warehouses. They only have like 3 days worth of inventory in each of their warehouses because their logistical software and their processes are so up to date so that they can get the products very, very quickly if need be. And then again, another one of my favorites, human resources, right? How do you manage your people? How do you manage your upper management? I also teach organizational behavior, and I think it's just like such a key part of how efficient and how profitable and how much value the firm can offer. Here's an example of Caterpillar. Again, ensuring product after sales and service outside of the United States, right? So they are a global company. If you, if you order something in Germany, but the company is really American, how do you make sure that you get those parts? Now let's talk further about the organization, the implementation of the strategy after talking about operations. The organizational structure, again, something that I also found so interesting. Maybe I'm just a big business nerd. The totality of a firm's organization, including the formal organizational structure, control systems, incentives, organizational culture, processes, and people. So first, I think that when I hear architecture, I think, okay, it's a map, right? How many people are at this level? How many people are at that level? Who reports to who, et cetera, et cetera. But it's a little bit more than that, right? It includes incentives. How much do you get paid? What's your bonus? And what's the culture like? At Salesforce, it's all about community. The Ohana is what they call it, right? They really want to make sure that you feel part of their family. Processes. So making sure that, when you get something approved, whether it be, office supplies or a trip or a new product, how does that work? And then the people, right? So making sure that the people are have the correct training and they they feel listened to, and they have the resources that they need. So organizational structure, right, is that formal division of the organization into subunits. So this is what initially maybe what you thought of when you heard architecture. It's the location of the decision-making responsibilities within that structure, right? Who reports to who does the CEO directly oversee? The establishment of integrating mechanisms to coordinate the activities of subunits, including cross-functional teams and pan-regional committees. And so now we're bumping a little bit more into international business. So you probably, if you work just domestically, you're familiar with cross-functional teams, right? That happened to me a lot as a project manager in IT, that I had a boss in IT, but I also had, we called it a client, but it was an internal client. I had somebody that I reported to, depending on what area of the bank I was working with at the time. If it was in the investment bank, it was usually someone on the trading floor. If it was in the consumer bank, it was maybe somebody who dealt with, processing checks, etc. So I was always on a cross-functional team. But pan-regional committees are super, again, exciting because now you have a boss or someone that you need to report to potentially who's in a different country, because maybe you're in the US and you're creating a product for Germany and there's a German head and a German team. And so now you have to report to them as to what your deliverables and how you're moving forward. When I was working for Credit Suisse in New York, again, I was in IT. I worked in the IT department that happened to be in the investment bank for the most part. In New York, it's mostly the investment bank for Credit Suisse. And so I had a boss in IT, but I also had someone that I reported to on the trading floor in New York. But we were opening up the stock exchange for the Mexico City office. And so then I had a colleague and I had a kind of a boss as well, a trader in Mexico City who I needed to report to on a regular basis. And so how do these things all move together? As you see, the arrows go back and forth all over the place. So they are all interdependent. I love that people are in the middle, right? Because as you know, I did my master's thesis at Pepperdine all about organizational communication and making sure that the people are getting the messages that they need to hear. How I think that's so important. I just felt as I was an employee, I wanted to make sure that I was included in all communications. Then we're going to talk a little bit about structure, processes, incentives and control, and culture. Let's go ahead and get into it on the next slide. First thing is controls, right? These are the metrics used to measure the performance of subunits and make judgments about how well the subunits are run. So how many products is a potential unit making? How many projects are they working on? Are they working over budget, under budget? Are they delivering on time, etc.? So at the beginning of the year, usually we set up some sort of metrics, right? Some KPIs, key performance indicators, and they say, right, whatever gets measured gets implemented, something like this, right? So every unit, every organization will have different metrics. We call them KPIs typically, depending on the business that unit is doing. Then we also have incentives. These are devices used to reward appropriate managerial behavior. And these are your performance metrics, you meeting with your boss every quarter, every half year, etc., to talk about how you're doing. This also talks about bonuses. Yeah, here at LMU, you get promotions, right? A lot of organizations get promotions. Processes, again, one of my favorites. When I graduated from Thunderbird, this was my focus, operations, because I worked in IT. So it's all about processes, all about how do we get the money from point A to point B, manner in which decisions are made and work is performed. And so I worked a lot of times in what's called efficiency management. And so making sure that these processes are most efficient. When we talk about this in an organization, this is the process for a new strategy, for new products. How do those things move forward? Every organization has a different way of doing that. Organizational culture, these are norms and value systems that are shared amongst the employees. So we're talking about Salesforce with Ohana, this community, etc. right, how things are done around here. If you talk to a lot of PhDs, they'll say that the definition of culture is somewhat loose and undefined, but for today, we're just going to say, these are the norms. People, again, another one of my favorites. So employees and the strategy used to recruit, compensate, and retain those individuals. And so, right, is that just with money? Is that with perks? Do we want to recruit people that speak to our mission? When we recruit here at LMU, we speak a lot about making sure that they understand the Jesuit traditions and our Catholic school, and how we speak to opening our doors to different cultures, etc. So there's a lot that goes along with people and recruiting and compensating. Now we're going to talk a little bit about strategic fit. The operations of the firm must support the firm's strategy. So the organizational architecture of the firm must match the firm's operations and strategy. So you'll see that sometimes the organizational architecture will switch and move, right? You'll have different org charts, you'll have a shift in culture, you might, with a different CEO, there's lots of different movement as we move along with the times. Here at LMU right now that, the world is becoming, DEI is a big thing. So recently we got a shift. Now, not only do we have Dean Smith and the assistant dean, Dr. Calbers, but we have a third dean here at LMU. She's the dean of DEI, Patricia Martinez, because LMU thought that was such a priority. So they wanted to make that, a major piece of our organizational chart, of our hierarchy. If the market conditions shift, so much of the firm's strategies, operations, and organization, obviously. And here's a nice little chart about about strategic fit. Right, operations support strategy, and organizational architecture supports both strategy or operations strategy and the main strategy. And you want to make sure that it moves then with market conditions. So this was the end of part one. A little long-winded, but as I said, again, pretty excited about these types of things. I'll go ahead and end chapter 12, part one, and see you in the next video.